I paid 4 months of back mortgage with my advance. And that was basically the whole thing, was like, oh, I didn't lose my house, but I was so close. Um, and it was just the most amazing feeling. I remember being like, okay, I didn't lose my house, because I was so afraid that for my kids, that that was going to happen. And from then I just kept building, and I've been
Have something to say, and the how is a real block for them, especially when they feel underrepresented, especially when they don't feel seen. And your ability to break through, like on a really tactical level, is one thing that I would love for us to come out of this conversation with today. So if
yeah.
you're willing to go one level deeper, of what did it look like in that tough space between writing to process pain and hustling, of course,
Hmm.
but and actually getting a book deal. Can you share with us that space? And for
Hmm.
so many underrepresented people, communities, this is such a critical opportunity where there's now more than ever an opportunity, and give us some steps.
Absolutely. I would say one of the ways in which I feel like I was so fortunate is that I was working in marketing when I started writing. Because what people don't tell you about writing, and likely any really creative field where you're trying to make ends meet, is how much it's geared towards privilege and geared towards who you know. There's so much inside baseball in writing, in publishing, in reaching out to editors, in pitching, that no one explains to you. And especially if you didn't go, I don't have a degree in journalism. My degree is in political science. I didn't know. I remember trying to admit to people I didn't know what a pitch was. Like, I could kind of guess. Like, I knew, like, oh, I'm throwing something at someone, maybe.
I know the word.
Yeah, like, I kind of get the motion. I don't know what it means technically, how to do this. I didn't know the etiquette of it. And what I had to learn first was that I had to admit those things. Like, I had to just say, I don't know what this means, and ask, does anyone know? And so I started making friends online with people who were in that space and saying, hey, this sounds awkward, but I don't know what a pitch is. Can someone tell me? And suddenly I would get these floods of information, and people, and I remember even asking editors, like, what's a good pitch to you? And they're like, no one's ever asked me that. Oh my God, what is a good pitch to me, right? And these are things that, like, if you have contacts, you don't have to worry about. Someone says, oh, let me introduce you to someone. Let me get your name in here, and I had, luckily, because I had worked in marketing, I kind of understood a little bit about how to phrase things, how to make things appeal. I learned, I knew automatically to be consistent in my message. So when I started writing, what I remember thinking, as I was starting to make a shift, and at first with I was writing a lot, and that's what I would say first and foremost: write a lot and write publicly. I was writing publicly out of necessity because I like had people in mind. Like, I need Jeff at the office to understand this, and I'm going to put it out here. Subtweeting before I was tweeting, but like with a whole essay, right? Of like, Jeff, this is for you. You need to understand this. And hoping that the people that in my life would pick up on this and learn. And so I was putting my work out very publicly because I desperately needed it. And what that helped me, if you're ever trying to write persuasive essays, that made my essays, I think, effective. And when I teach, this is what I teach as well, is I had the audience in my head. I had the audience for my piece in my head. It wasn't me. And a lot of times when you're writing, people are like, I'm just going to open up my heart and it's going to be a thing of beauty. And what you're doing is you're actually writing something you've already processed, you've already been through, and you're writing the end of it. You're writing the very flat story. You're not taking anyone on a journey with you because you're not thinking of the person who's going to be reading it. You're thinking, I would like this, and I've seen that. I mean, I could write about a rock collection if I was into rocks, and it would be the most boring story ever if I'm writing for myself because I have already fallen in love with rocks. And no one who isn't in love with rocks is going to like that, right? And we like to think that it's different for all of our personal essays, but it's not. And so because I think I was trying to grab people who really weren't understanding from the beginning of the journey and pull them along, I intrinsically understood, I started to see the value of finding people in a particular spot in their understanding or education and pulling them along my journey. And knowing your audience and writing to that audience, not beyond it, is important. And especially because the internet likes to have people thinking, if I don't answer every question, if I don't hit every point, all the trolls are going to come after me. I'm going to be canceled, and then I'll just die. And people really feel like that, and it's someone's always going to find something, And so I did that. And then my other rule was basically, I knew I was a Black woman. I'm a Black woman writing. And I was never going to have the contacts. I was not going to write the same way as someone who came through these different educational channels or through these internships and things like that. All I was going to have at the end of the day was my voice. And so if I couldn't look at every piece that was published under my name and recognize it clearly, I knew I was never going to build an audience. I knew that the desk jobs weren't waiting for me. The Times wasn't going to call and say, will you be our next columnist? A paper wasn't going to call and say, come be our next columnist. So I was going to have to get people who like my voice, who liked what I had to say, and who followed it from place to place. And so I always tell people, don't let an editor change your voice. I mean, be nice to editors, please. Be so nice to editors. Cooperate with editors. But when you read a piece and you read it out loud, if it doesn't sound like you, you're only going to become more mortified over the years as you read it, and you're going to stop an audience from being able to connect with who you are. What I have as a Black woman, as a Black queer woman, is valuable because I'm a Black queer woman, because it is my unique perspective. And if I lose sight of that, and it doesn't sound like me anymore, if you can interchange my piece with the work of anyone else, then I have nothing, because whiteness gets to fill those jobs. White men get to be the desk writers who can write filler articles and do just fine sounding like everyone else. They get to sound like everyone else. There's no reason for anyone to look for me to fill that position. I have to be me. And that's my value add. That's my value add to the system, to literature, to journalism, and knowing that and staying strong to that, finding your voice and saying what works, what connects with the audience I envision for this piece in my own voice, will help get you there. And so, for me writing the book, it was funny because I had written so many articles, article after article, and I was lucky enough that an agent, Lauren Abramo, found me, reached out to me when hardly anyone knew who I was, and just said, I'm just fascinated, love following you. Have you ever thought of writing a book? And I said, no, absolutely not. Don't want to do that. I have ADD. Articles are perfect for me because I can write the thing, put it down, send it off. It's done. I may never invoice. I may never answer an email, but I can do the article part. And a book sounded like way too much work on one particular thing. And she just waited. She said, okay, I'll wait. But,
Wow.
And she did. And it was probably over a year before I came back and said, okay, you know what, maybe I do need to write this book. And we worked on it and got the proposal out there. But find the people that believe in you. And I would say that she would not have come forward if I hadn't just been writing article after article after article after article that showed that there was more in me that people might want to sit with. And that's really what I would say. Get your work out there. A lot of people go, I just need to write the book, and people will come, you know what, get something out there. Keep getting your work out there. Believe in your work. Even if it's just your blog, don't denigrate that. Plenty of people build great, huge blogs that people love to follow. But just keep writing and keep putting your work out to the public and listening and getting that feedback.
Were you ever stuck? Did you ever feel stuck in that process? This idea of repetition in order to find the voice, and it's, you are the best gift that you can give to any industry or as a creator of anything. But curiously, were you blocked at any point during that process? And, or was it just the necessities, the framework that you already shared with us socioeconomically that you needed to just keep pushing, or were you stuck ever?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it was this mix of, I mean, imposter syndrome is real, and I think everyone in any field, but especially creative fields, and especially women and femmes, especially women and femmes of color, are really socialized to believe that if we're doing well, it's luck and not our skill, not our talent. And the first time I ever wrote a piece that I knew was going to be published, like in a website, a real website, I had a full panic attack for an entire day, bawled my eyes out, had to be talked down by like 3 different people, convinced that it wasn't the worst thing in the world, that my life was not going to be over, that I really did have the right to write about personal things. I had the right to get my voice out there. I remember like hyperventilating, literally, and just
Mm.
reaching out to everyone I knew and being like, is this the worst? Is it awful? Is it going to be awful? And then, every piece I would say probably for the first 6 to 8 months, I couldn't send a piece to an editor without having someone else read it first. I was so worried that that whatever it was that was working was going to stop, and I had to actually, for myself, for my own peace of mind, I had to start like spending time with all of my work and looking at similar elements and seeing, do I have a pattern? Because I was convinced that maybe I was just getting lucky, that I didn't actually have a way of writing. I didn't actually have a skill because I didn't take these classes. And I had to look and say, wait, do I have a skill? What do I have? And I started asking people, when people say I like that, I'm like, what did you like? And they're like, oh, it's great. No, I'm like, no, specifically, like what senses, what pieces, because I was trying to figure out why it worked and how. And it took me years to just believe that I'm a good writer. And I still get stuck. And I think that especially if you're writing, there's this idea that you'll be hit by inspiration and then you'll like finish a novel in 3 days and it'll be amazing. And you know what? Whoever does that, I hate those people.
Me
They're
too.
awful people. I never want to be around them. I wish nothing but bad things for them in life, because that's not how it usually works. Usually it's awful. You want to tear your hair out. You regret that the written word was ever invented. And you're convinced that you've written the worst thing in the world. And, even my last book, I was so convinced it was the worst book ever. People would be like, how's it going? I'm like, why would you ask me that? That's so mean. Why would you ask me about my book? And what I realized, and I have to remind myself of constantly, is that just because something is hard, it doesn't mean it's bad. And when it comes to creative fields, I think we're supposed to think, oh, it was a breeze. I was inspired, my muse arrived, and I wrote it, and it was beautiful. And instead it was like, oh, I hated it. I had to drag myself to my computer every day, and I was convinced it was the worst thing in the world because it wasn't fun. And it's not fun. It's a job. And that can really mess you up because you can think like, some of my best pieces, I hated writing. I had one piece that I wrote, and it's such a solid piece. And I didn't send it out for publication for probably 8 months because I hated writing it so much that I was convinced it was awful. And I had to like put it in the bad bin and then come back to it and then be like, oh, this isn't the garbage I thought it was. It was just a tough piece. And even with my book, you go through so much, both books, and I'm like, oh, this is awful. And then you get through your revisions, and I'm like, did I write this? Oh, that's a good sentence. When did I, in between all the trash I was apparently writing, I wrote this good paragraph. Oh, and this one too. And I think we have to be more realistic about what creative life is like, because yeah, I know it's what I'm supposed to be doing, and that pulls me through, the times where I would rather be doing absolutely anything else, which is most of the time.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just not that you need it, but just so you know, the world, Christine McDonough, your writing is so exemplary. I tell my friends to read everything you write. Jenna from Jenna's Homecoming, I spend time with all of your work. Brooke Eston from Spain, thank you so much for doing this. Luis, what I love so much about Ijoma is not just the great mindset and perspective, it's the deep purpose, the anti-racism, and you're just so awesome. So it's scrolling too fast. I had to take a screen cap in order to get the praise. So maybe somewhere in here is a lesson for those listening and watching right now. Thank you for being so candid about your process. And, here you are As you said, you started writing your book in 2016. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
For when you want, so you want to talk about race, and here we are, 4 years later, and the outpouring of support. Is a really curious comment from Ravi. I'm in Melbourne, Australia, born in Fiji of Indian heritage. I completely disconnected from my culture in order to fit into Western culture. In 2014, I found my grandmother who I thought had passed away, and she helped connect me to my heritage. The question is, Ravi says, I'm working to dismantle structural racism so my 3-year-old son doesn't face the pain I did growing up. The question is your work for future generations or now? I think I know the answer because it was a little bit of, we foreshadowed it in the beginning of the conversation, but I was curious if you could respond specifically to Ravi.
Yeah. I think it's for all. I mean, I feel like where I am in this process right now is definitely trying to hold space and protect the work that young people are doing, and they're doing some of the most important work right now. I believe that our vision changes. Our vision is limited by the time that we're in, right? So my idea of freedom is much more limited than an 18-year-old activist's idea of freedom because of where I grew up in, what had been accomplished as I was coming up versus what's been accomplished now. But I'm also, working to honor the people who have built the space for me to stand today. And also I believe in every, I'm in the battle for Black lives. I believe in every Black life. So yeah, mine as well. Mine and my children, my grandchildren, my community, um, but also, my father who's been dead for 12 years. I think that we all deserve joy and to thrive, and we deserve freedom. And in the struggle that I know we won't see victory in my lifetime, we're not going to see the end of white supremacy in my lifetime. But in the battle for Black lives, in the battle for all of our lives free from racial oppression, we can still see and protect joy, and we can still, take our moments of success, and we can take each life saved and celebrate that. So I don't believe that you reach a time where your time has passed. I definitely become less relevant in the struggle as time goes on, and that makes me so happy. Um, but I still know I have use to hold and to keep things moving forward in my privilege, in my access, in my experience, for myself and for everyone. I've run into people who are just discovering at 60 that they don't have to live half a life. That they can be whole people, that they can still say what happened to me matters, and I deserve better. And it's never too late, and that's a beautiful thing to see. So, I think we have to just fight for all of us all the
Mhm.
time.
You mentioned earlier Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. Um, this idea that I'm about to share came up in an earlier conversation I had with Roxane Gay, whom I know you are connected to. And it's this idea of it's hard to be what you can't see out in the world. And you've done such a good job of showing up as to being seen with the recognition of your book and all of the work that no one ever sees. I'm wondering if there are some things that people still can't see that we need more of. We need more people in a particular area. Could you be prescriptive at all? What areas that we can't see ought we cultivate people showing up in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what needs to happen first and foremost is we need first an accurate accounting of where we've been, right? People of color, trans people, disabled people, we have queer people, we've been everywhere, and we have done everything. Maybe not to the same degree, but we have. And because we've done it in the face of such obstacles makes it even, more important. Um, and that needs to be accurately told. The amount of times that I run into young people who just have no idea that anyone has come before, that needs to be shown. But also, I think, what we need to do is recognize that that we exist as more than struggle, and that, we have something to offer every field, every experience, but also that our basic humanity matters. What I would love to see just mediocre ass people of every demographic doing fine. Like, I would love that, right? I would love to get away from the whole, you have to be exceptional. Like, we have to have, what? I of course want to see Black excellence in every field. I also want to see regular ass, medium talented people who just want to go to work and be a member of their community do fine. I don't want exceptional to have to be what gets us by. Like, we are human beings, and I want more examples of that. I don't want it to be we are either, criminalized and turned into like the bad guys, or we are um, exceptional and we're presidents and we're, you know, astrophysicists. We can also just, live our life, and there needs to be space for that. And I would also say, I spend a lot of time in corporate settings. I spend a lot of time talking to other people. Is there a lens flare here? I can.
There is. It's like it looks like little diamonds are being sprinkled onto.
Aw, that's so sweet. There. Okay.
A little better. Thank you.
It's a little better. So, I'm constantly telling people, because you hear these phrases that annoy the crap out of me, where people are like, I don't want to be the first Black engineer at the company. I want to be a great engineer who happens to be Black. Like, I actually want people to recognize the value of our unique lived experiences, of our unique cultural perspectives, um, of our unique accomplishments in every field. I want that to be part of what people seek out. I want people to actually seek out those experiences and seek out and say, no, you know what? We actually do need more Asian English teachers in this school. We actually do need, more Black weathermen on TV. We need that because it adds to the field. It is of value. It is not just, and it's not just of value so that people can see themselves in these positions. It's of value because of what the unique experience and um, cultural experience and ideals adds. We are different culturally in many ways, and very diverse within our races and ethnicities, and we bring that along with all of our other skills to the spaces we're in, and I would love to see that valued. I would love to see that be sought after the way we seek after so many other skill sets, and appreciated for what it is.
Mm. Your journey has not been without peril and risk and pain, and you've written and talked about that in a number of different places. And one of the things that I love about your work is your focus on self-care. And I'm wondering, for people, anyone putting themselves out there, I think, you could probably, I'm trying to make this universal, so it's not just your particular lens on self-care, but maybe the best way of asking it then is like, what role does self-care play in your ability to show up, in your ability to do hard things, in your ability to put the art that you want to represent in the world out there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say when I talk about self-care, or when people ask me about self-care, I think it's really important that we decolonize the idea of self-care, and that we like de-white the idea of self-care, because self-care is culturally relative. And for me, sometimes self-care is what I do just for myself. Sometimes it's community care. And I think that especially, I think the Black community and many other communities of color we get by with each other, right? And it's not, can I have a spa day? It's who calls me, who do I call, who do I bring dinner to, who do I reach out to rejuvenate. And it's really, for me, about finding, what is your purpose, and finding a purpose in love. There is this idea, especially in the Black community, that we have to be martyrs for our cause, that we have to sacrifice everything to get by, we have to sacrifice everything to fight racism, instead of recognizing that we are fighting for our lives. We are fighting to thrive. We are fighting because we deserve to be happy, fulfilled, secure, safe people with secure families and communities. And if you don't replenish that, if you don't realize that your life is the Black life you're fighting for, or your life, regardless of what you're fighting for, that you are what you're fighting for as well. You're not just fighting externally. If you don't find what rejuvenates you, what motivates you, that lives in a space of love, you won't be able to continue on in your work. And I would say that especially for people in marginalized populations, it's not just what can you do to get out and protest. It's what can you do to get through a day at the office. In a world that is not built for you, in a world that can be very hostile to you, you're not just fighting for that next paycheck. You have to do things that remind you that you deserve joy, that your community deserves joy, and that means that you have to really give it that time. And so for me, it's trying to remember that I have to be very deliberate, trying to remember that I have to say, even now, we are on the Oregon coast, and I had to remind myself today, like, I can just not do things today. Like, I came here to relax because I needed to relax, came here to spend time with my family, and I'm going to intentionally do that because that's what I'm fighting for and working for. And if I went through all of this and I didn't see my family, didn't take care of myself, then I'm no longer fighting for that, and it's important to remember that and to keep that focus more than focus on what we're trying to avoid, focus on, the pain we're trying to get through, to also recognize we're trying to nurture joy.
Mm. Wow. Thank you for that. Again, I just got to let you know the Morgan and Jenna, Maria, Stephanie, Jonas, Jeremiah, Jenna, Corey, just expressing a huge amount of gratitude for your truth and what you're saying today. I wanted to thank you. I'm curious if we can shift gears to all of the things you're working on. You mentioned early on how, or I guess collectively, we talked about how the book is now, 3+ years on, 2 to 3 years on, and it's obviously in the context of now having just a huge, as you said, you've sold more books in the last month than you have in the last 2.5 years. But I have just some, I don't know, you've got more stuff coming, and I'm wondering if you can tell us some of the things that are exciting to you right now about your work as a creator. If you can share both, different media that you're working in, and why you're making some of these choices.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next book coming out in December is called Mediocre, Dangerous Legacy of White Male America. A pretty self-explanatory book, I think, title-wise, just like the last one was. But this is looking at 150 years of the formation of violent white male identity in this country and the way in which it protects itself at great cost to everyone of all races, ethnicities, and genders. And that is a book that I poured a lot of work into. It is very different from the current book. It was very difficult to write, especially writing through a lot of what our family went through this last year, writing through, a pandemic. I'm proud of it and look forward to it finally being out into the world. I am very excited about a film that I am in with that my brother Ahame Faleoluo and Charles Mudede, the brilliant Charles Mudede, wrote. And if you aren't familiar with Charles, but you have read my interview I did with Rachel Dolezal a couple years ago, Charles was the editor of that piece and also the person who I wouldn't have written it if it weren't for him. If anyone else had asked me, I would have said absolutely not. I almost said absolutely not to Charles himself. I think I answered the phone knowing he was going to ask me and said no. And then he talked me into it because he knows my voice better than myself sometimes. But I used to work with Charles constantly, and he and my brother are very close, wrote this amazing film called Finnskin, and I play a fictionalized version of myself. I had to learn how to be an actor type of person. and it was a brilliant project, so much fun, and it was so beautiful working with my brother, working with Charles. I actually just saw like an almost completely finished version of it the other day, and I was
Wow.
like, what? It actually looks like a movie because you're making it. I was like, oh, these reviews, are going to be like, well, someone's kid made a movie, and whoa, what was he Joe doing? But no, it looks like a real movie. I'm so excited about that. So those are two main things, and then I'm just, for me, hopefully for now, I'm I'm looking at like writing creatively, so I'm trying to, I've been very clear of like I think this for the next couple of years hopefully is my last book that's specifically like a hard nonfiction on racism in America. I need to connect with writing for joy. Believe it or not, it's not incredibly fun to like spend 2 years looking up genocide and torture and imprisonment and death. And I would love my writing to benefit me as much, or maybe even more, because chances are my beginning fiction is going to be god awful. So probably more than it benefits other people. But I would love to like try fiction. I would love to take writing workshops and stuff like that. So that's been my goal once the next book's out in the world and we do all of that, to settle in and just be a writing student again, and live in that space. So that's kind of been, yeah, what I've been up to.
Wow. Well, I should take a second and give a nod to Charles, who was the first person that shared your work with me some time ago, and he was on this show 10 years ago.
Wow.
10 years ago last month, he was on this exact same show. So you can, if anyone wants to go take a look, it's just my name and Charles Mudede, Mudede. But yeah, what a wonderful human. And this idea of filmmaking, like, how about, is the acting more exciting for you? The writing, what roles? And then also, why? Is it just the newness? Is it because it's something different? Is it another vehicle for your work that may hit a different audience, or all three?
It
Why?
was it was a real mix. So for the film, it was a mix of things. One, it was working with my brother, my brother and I are incredibly close. We're a year and a half apart in age, but we don't work together very often creatively. He's a musician and a storyteller in different space. But also, I love working with Charles, and the thought of working with Charles, I am stubborn. I stick to my morals to a fault. So people who follow my work closely know that I have been very mad at The Stranger, and that actually ended my working relationship with Charles, who's there, and I've desperately missed it. I mean, like I literally cried missing working with him. Probably one of the best working relationships I ever had as a writer was with Charles, and so in this whole new capacity, to work with him. Now, Charles snuck this up on me. If you know Charles and you know Charles, he's a
Yes,
character, right? So
he
this
is a
started
character.
with him calling me Ijoma. Can you do me a big favor, dear? What? Oh, well, the person that was going to read the lines to play you, they can't make it. Can you read the lines? Okay. So I show up at this pass through, read the lines. And he's like, oh, you're good at this. Would you play you? And at this point, it was literally like 5 lines. I was like, sure. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Whatever. I can probably do 5 lines playing myself, my little Courtney Love moment. Right. And I was like, okay. All right. Then we got together for his birthday, maybe a year later, 6 months to a year later. And he was like, oh, the money people for the movie, they keep telling me I have to have a talk to you about the film before we move forward. I'm like, okay. And he was like, it's just the parts changed a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, we'll talk about it later. We don't talk about it later. Then a few months later, I get a script. It's literally the second most lines in the character in the movie after my brother. It went from being 5 lines to like a major one. And I was like, oh, are these the few changes, Charles, that we were
This
talking
is
about
so
here?
classic Charles too.
Yeah.
Just the breadcrumb. Oh my
Yeah.
God,
It's like, oh,
amazing.
you'll be perfect. He kept saying, you'll be the next Oprah Winfrey. That's what he kept saying. It was amazing. So I was like, ah, crap. So I had to take acting lessons. I was like, oh no. But it was so fun. I loved it so much. I learned, that it's a very different life. Like writers are like, oh, I'll write now when I wake up. And acting, it's like, oh, I have to be somewhere and I have to be there all day. And you don't care, like, that I'm tired or that I have a thing with my kids. Like, nope, you got to be there on set. And Charles was a delight. Like, he was so. My quintessential Charles moment is we're trying to shoot this scene, and there is a lizard in a cage, not part of the scene, but just in the scene. But he wanted the lizard to move desperately, and the lizard would not move. And I'm in the room next to him. My brother is pretending to talk to me through a door. And so I hear him going, oh, let's try it again. Let's get this lizard to move. 8 takes later, this lizard has not moved. And my brother goes, wait a minute, Charles, is this about the fucking lizard?
We're gonna have a stand-in lizard here any second now.
Exactly. He just wanted the lizard. And like we did one scene where we had working with a child, which can be difficult, right? A young child, we get this scene and after a couple of takes, Charles comes out and goes, the snake was amazing. They're just like, so yeah, I loved it. I loved every moment of it. I don't know if I would want to act again, but I loved like being a part of that whole creative process of taking something, this piece. My brother's worked on this piece in various stages for 10 years, and to see it translate to film, to know you could translate our life to film. Like I was like, what? Our weird, boring life? Okay. Yeah, I loved it. It was really fun.
And just for reference for anyone who saw the show, it's based, if I'm not mistaken, on Now I'm Fine.
Yes.
Was it a one-man performance that your brother did?
Yeah,
right?
what do they call it? The New York Times called him a jazz memoirist, and so it's a spoken word / music, 17-piece orchestra, singing, storytelling, jokes type thing, and then they took that and translated it into like a film. Yeah.
When can we expect this? When is this happening?
Yeah, so I mean, it is pretty much done, and we're looking at like late summer, getting it into festivals and getting it out there. Of course, the pandemic put a wrench into everything, but yeah, we are looking at actually getting it out to the world soon. So definitely follow us on like Instagram. There is a Finnskin Film Instagram page, or follow me or follow Aham or follow Charles, and we post whatever information we have when we have it.
That was my sort of wrap up, is if there can be some attention that you are able to direct for the people who are watching this, because there will be a lot of people watch this and it will have a lifespan. And I'm wondering, is there something in particular that you would direct them to? Body of work, course of action? What are some tactics and to either further connect people to your work, or what would you like to ask of anyone who's participating and watching right now?
I would absolutely say that it is really important to look at who you're listening to, who you're getting information from, and diversify as much as possible. And don't diversify within whiteness. So a lot of times what I find oftentimes, especially but even within our own ethnic groups, racial groups, or social groups, will say, who are you following that you like? And we're asking people just like us, like, who are you listening to, other version of me? And then they give slightly different flavors of the same person. Start branching out, right? Look to be like, this is someone who is way more radical than me or slightly more conservative than me. Who are they looking at? Who are they listening to? But then look at things like, do I have enough indigenous voices giving me news? Like, where am I getting my daily news? Am I getting it from CNN, or am I getting it from environmental activists, from indigenous activists, from disabled activists, right? From Black activists? If I'm following Black activists, are they all light-skinned, privileged Black writers and thinkers? Or do we have people who are incarcerated, right? Many people don't know that, like, people who are incarcerated right now are putting out written work that you can read and find out about what's happening. And, am I learning about from, Black, trans, disabled people, right? Like, am I really getting all of this information? Because it all matters, and that perspective matters. And what we're doing a lot of times is playing catch up for what the most marginalized people have been saying for a long time. You will learn so much more. Your idea of the world will be so much broader. You will get so much more from anything you see on the news. You will understand on a deeper level if you start broadening who you follow. So really branch out there. Start looking up words like abolition. Like put abolition in your searches. If you're looking up environmental rights, put abolition in that search. If you're looking up, race theory, put abolition in the, like put the most radical terms you can think of out there. Find what the, writers and thinkers are, and then look at their sources. If you find an article you love, look at the sources, click on the links, find out who they're referencing, follow those people, but diversify where your knowledge comes from. Every day, an exercise I used to have people do in workshops is I would say pick one day out of the week and look at every interaction you have and what it touches and think of how much of that is white and male or abled, right? And so you get up and you're making coffee. Where's this coffee coming from? Who's making money from that coffee? When you're watching the news, who's presenting that news? Who's writing the scripts? Who's advertising it? When you're getting dressed, who's making money off the clothes that you're wearing? Who's making, who's getting culturally relevant from that? When you're listening to music, who's making money from that industry? Like who's picking what you're listening to? All of these things day in and day out, and look at that and just see where you can diversify that, see where you can branch out, because different people exist in all of these spaces and you can really branch that out. So just try that exercise for a day. Even quoting people, when you're getting in an argument on Facebook, look and see how often you're quoting white dudes in your argument, and think of how absurd it would be. Like, according to this white dude, we should do this. And according to this white dude, we should do this. And then according to this white dude, and write it out like a script. I went to this dinner owned by white people, and made money from this version of an ethnic food that was made by white people. And then I went home and I watched the evening news and listened to a white man tell me about news from a white male perspective. And, and then and just think of your day and then realize how absurd that is and see what you can do to diversify it.
I would love to share just a short story along those lines that this has been a powerful experience when, for me, I wrote a book and I cataloged every single example on every single page, the race, gender, point of view of the example. And prior to starting that research project, I asked everyone who'd read it what they thought about all of the balance in the book. And it was, oh yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was like, yeah. And the research yielded just shocking results. And so as someone who is started this work and will never be completed, I just want to say that has added so much richness to my life. I learned from your Instagram a couple weeks ago about colorism as an example, and I have to say it's created a richness, and I just feel it simultaneously has me feeling terrible and inspired at the same time. And so I want to thank you, and I can't wait to have you back on the show when your next book's out there. And the film, I'm already like Googling it as we've been talking here, trying to find anything I can out. And I know it'll be out there in good time. I just thank you for sharing your wisdom, your vision, your journey around pursuing your dreams and career. And thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. This was a real pleasure.
I'm going to keep you on the line for another 90 seconds, but the world is out there cheering, as I've shared so many times. Thank you for participating, and the world, you know where to go to find Ijeoma's work. She is IJEOMAOLUO.com. And Instagram, I'm a consumer of her Instagram as well. Anything else, anywhere else in the world you'd like to point us besides the book, of course, but anything in particular before we go?
If anyone wants to follow what I'm up to, everything's under my name. I figure you learn my name, you can learn anything. But also just look at youth activists right now. Youth are doing amazing things. Find out what young people are doing. exclusively look right now towards people between the ages of 17 and 25, and they inspire me greatly. And here in Seattle, Mutual Aid Books is doing some great work, young people getting great books out at protests and community events for people to learn more. But all over the world, we're seeing young people do amazing things. Spend time looking at them, take them seriously, because our media isn't.
Mm. Thank you so much. And for everyone else out there in the world, you know where to go to support Ijoma and her work. And looking forward to having you back on the show another time soon. And I bid you all adieu.